I'm going to have somebody rewrite that bio at some point, way too long. Thank you for having me. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about spaceports, the importance for access to space. We can do all this great stuff, but if we can't get up there, it doesn't do us a lot of good. We're going to talk a little bit about robotics and agriculture in outer space. This is an artificial rendering of a spaceport, what it would look like in northern Minnesota. As it turns out, through my work through AI and robotics, I was looking for, do I have to go down to Cape Canaveral and wait for that launch delay? I thought, geez, Minnesota might be a neat place. And it turns out that when we're talking polar inclinations, I want to be very clear about that, going to the Moon-Mars asteroid belt, you have to go to the North Pole or a polar inclination. It turns out that our mining industry, the mine pits and specifically Taconite Harbor, are abandoned sites that are perfect for launching heavy launch facilities. Little known fact, we're not sure if we're supposed to share it just yet, but Space Force, UND, and North Dakota are, I think, looking at Minot Air Force Base for some additional launch capabilities. We're not sure how much or how big of a rocket we can do there yet. When we talk about, if you look in the middle of the map there, you're going to see a Superior launch corridor. That's basically where Taconite Harbor is. This is an abandoned ocean-going ship port that's probably about 4 hours east of here. We're able to launch out over Lake Superior for 160 miles. We'll be at 60,000 feet, and at that point, internationally, legally, we can cross over Canada and go to that polar inclination. You may be asking, why not the equator? We are 2 degrees south of where the Russians have launched every rocket they've ever had. We're about 3% less efficient than if we were at the equator, a couple percent less efficient than if we were at Cape Canaveral. If you think about heavy launch going to the Moon-Mars asteroid belt, that is the future of humanity. It represents an opportunity to give equal access to outer space to other people other than my hero, Elon Musk. I like him, but the fact that he's taken up 98% of our launch windows is limiting the future we have. Now, when you look at where, it says Schroeder there on the map, the middle launch there, there's actually a heavy railroad that's been abandoned that goes up to a town called Babbitt, which is about the middle of that map. And from Babbitt to Hoyt Lakes, it is very lightly populated. In fact, we're about 3 miles from the mines to the nearest mining town. And not only did they dig a 400-foot deep trench, but they took all that material and they placed that towards the town. So think about a natural funnel. If there was a disaster, the flames are more going up in the air as opposed to rolling across the plains. The area between Babbitt and Taconite Harbor, as some other people brought up yesterday, is actually a military no-fly zone. We train our fighter jets up there, so we don't have to divert traffic. We think that there's somewhere between 100 to 300 potential launch sites there. If you think of Cape Canaveral, there's potentially 14 if we ignore some of the towns near the 10th through 14th range. And as somebody I think mentioned yesterday, we're 1 hurricane away from losing 85% of the US launch capabilities to the Moon-Mars asteroid belt. So I think it's important to do that. The other thing we have to talk about in space is robotics. I'm with CSM Robotics and Minnesota Innovates. Minnesota Innovates is a nonprofit that tries to bring some of these ideas forward. CSM Robotics is my day job. I specialize in mobile robots, adaptive, collaborative, and industrial robots. Specifically, we are one of the leaders in vision and AI. And it's the combination of this vision and AI that's going to allow us to go out in outer space and allow humans to interact. When we think about these grow habitats, we're not going to be dealing with the CO2 we do in our greenhouses. We're going to be pumping them full of CO2 to get faster, more aggressive growth, which is not conducive to humans being in that same room. We want robots and humans working together. We want that human to go in when the robot breaks, and yes, they will break in zero gravity as fast as they break on this planet. When we think about mining, manufacturing, building these habitats, as much of it as possible, it may not be robotic, but it has to be automated. How do we take that regolith, re-energize it with the right biomes and the right materials and chemicals so that we get the type of plant growth that we want? As you know, I work very closely with companies like Gravity Grains, And we're looking at that entire system. How do we generate the energy? How do we grow the material that the astronauts and the people in the future will need to live up there? Um, Again, a lot of that has to be automated. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if we can't get there. The Chinese do not care where they launch a rocket from. We don't want them necessarily being the leaders of humanity. We want to be that balancing force there so that we all have equal access to off-planet. We not only want to mine and manufacture, but I'm going to kind of go back to the robot thing, actually to the spaceport. We want to be able to mine, manufacture, and colonize outer space. As human seed stock, should something go wrong here, it would be nice if we could come back once the planet's ready to be habited again. As I talk about this, again, it comes down to that access. And as we've seen anything throughout history, when we limit access to certain groups of people, sometimes the wrong actors get to make the wrong decisions. We want to have this be a little bit more democratic and get us there. What we are proposing and calling this a Can-Am spaceport is, if you realize, you'll see that squiggly line at top, that's the Canadian border. We're going to be infringing a little bit on some water rights at different times, and we're going over their airspace. The Canadians are also very excited about having access to outer space. It was funny when I met the general from Space Force, their thought was, well, Dave, there's, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, you guys got nothing to support an aerospace industry. And I kind of reminded them that, all those new drones you're flying, that was North Dakota. Do you know all that composite material, all the wind farms we see? That's all North Dakota. They have a university and they have a system and they have a state that's actually dedicated to this. Minnesota has some of the resources that we can tap into. And why do I bring that up? This is a $30 billion annual regional opportunity. Not $30 billion to Minnesota. It's $30 billion across North Dakota, South Dakota, Canada, Wisconsin, Michigan, and even Iowa. It's going to drive jobs. It's going to create a diverse economy. If you think we're going to bring back iron ore from space at 63 cents per 100 metric tons or whatever the crazy price is, we're not bringing back iron ore. We're going after nickel, palladium, rare earth elements, things that we need to use on this planet to reduce the stress from humanity on this planet. When we look at these opportunities, it's important that we all pull together as a region and start asking, how do we go about this? And I think I'm just been incredibly impressed with UND, looking at this from an esoteric view of how do we get there, how do we feed people, how do we manufacture. And a couple of points I want to hit on manufacturing. If we look at Moore's Law on chips, you haven't seen a new computer come out in 5 years, because it was 5-6 years ago Moore's Law stopped. We are no longer doubling the speed of our computers anymore. We have basically exasperated what silicon can do. In order to do this, we need to go grow crystals and different materials that mimic and improve what silicon can do. And the new materials will probably bring a 10 to 30 time increase in our current chip speed. A lot of people are really hoping for quantum computing. I'm rooting for them, but I don't think in our lifetime and in our children's lifetime we're probably going to see a working quantum computer that industry actually can use. Think about when you were in the 70s and we heard about the supercomputers and they really didn't get affordable till the late 90s. I think we're on that trajectory. We need to look at new materials. Why outer space for growing crystals? There is no microturbulence in the crystal growth method. So we get very uniform, perfect crystals which allow us to do more, not only in electronics, but think about medicine. How many people here know what COVID was? Really? None? Okay, thank you for a few hands. I appreciate that. If you think of the crystals that altered our RNA to get through COVID, it came down to the equivalent of 6 one-gallon Kemp's buckets of crystals to inoculate the entire planet. That's a very inexpensive way to deorbit that. As North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota move forward with our space efforts, one of the key things about Lake Superior, unlike the rest of the world, is it's fresh water. If we have to deorbit minerals into fresh water, we're not contaminated, we're not rusting out our stuff. Gales of November come to mind, so there are a few months where it's a little bit, but think during the winter we would just position barges across that area and deorbit these payloads onto those barges. And why do I bring that up? If we're going to bring minerals back from outer space, they're going to have to be processed. And we already, around the entire Great Lakes region, have the infrastructure and the communities that are dedicated to doing that. We are going to breathe new life into these communities. If you're not familiar with the Minnesota Iron Range, we have roughly 100 years of iron ore left, maybe a little bit more, but roughly 100 years. So that's 3 generations. And in 3 generations, we don't have an economy up there. If we're bringing things back from outer space, we actually bring the economies in our area for another millennia. Let's see if I have anything else. I want to thank you for your time. The other one major manufacturing opportunity is growing organs on Earth is probably not going to happen, but growing organs in a 0 to low gravity environment is conducive to that cellular structure. So think med device, think manufacturing, think agriculture. It doesn't do us any good if we don't have access. We need to secure these sites in North Dakota and Minnesota so that we have the right humanitarian efforts moving forward. Thank you for your time.